Okay, Shadi, welcome to the University of Denver. It's a huge honor for our Center for Middle East Studies to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here. Yeah.
I want to ask you just a few questions about what's happening in Egypt today. You know, looking back 3 years ago, there was an incredible amount of optimism that there was a historic breakthrough that had happened. But then last summer, we had this coup d'etat, and things have gone from bad to worse. Just today, it was announced that 683 members of the Muslim Brotherhood have been effectively targeted for death. They've been sort of, and that's on top of the 529 a couple of weeks ago. Are you surprised by this eliminationist strategy that the Egyptian military is pursuing? It comes at sort of a shock because it's a departure from even the darkest days of the Mubarak era. We're seeing something here that's unique, that's sort of very sort of pernicious and very ugly. Is that a surprise to you as someone who sort of studied Egyptian politics?
Well, we knew that the coup was going to be bad. So when that was set in motion, I think a lot of us, especially American analysts who are kind of looking at it from afar, we know historically that coups don't work out well and they don't contribute to democracy. And coups are even I think, more destructive when they happen in ideologically polarized context, because the stakes are so high, it's seen as a zero-sum battle. And especially we're talking about a group like the Brotherhood that is, you know, you can kind of put it to the side. They're more susceptible to repression. It's not as much of a broad-based movement with, you know, an umbrella of different groups that are part of that. So I think they were especially vulnerable to repression after Morsi was ousted. Now, we knew it would be bad, but not this bad. So even, you know, I really had bad expectations on July 3rd, but this exceeds anything that we could have imagined. I mean, the sheer scale of repression, and that's why you don't even compare it to the Mubarak era. You know, it would be good to go back to what we had under Mubarak compared to this. I think actually we have to go back to Nasser to see something even comparable. And the sheer numbers are even worse than Nasser. We're talking about as many as 20,000 arrested in 10 months, more than 2,500 killed. We see the worst mass killing in modern Egyptian history on August 14th in Rabat. It's shocking.
And so the question is that what exactly is the Egyptian military hope to accomplish by this eliminationist strategy? Is it thinking that if it can just sort of massacre and assassinate and put to death a large number of Muslim Brotherhood supporters, that will sort of solve their problem of political rule, and that will sort of allow them to continue to function? Is that the strategy? Is there anything? Do you have any insight, in other words, in terms of the mindset of the Egyptian military? Who's making the decisions, or is these are sort of like haphazard, ad hoc decisions that are being made as things develop?
So we shouldn't look at the Egyptian regime as a unitary actor. There are different elements in the deep state, or if you want to call it the wide state, because they're not totally in sync, but they share a basic dislike and animosity towards the Muslim Brotherhood. So you see the judiciary, it's hard to, you know, perhaps there's coordination with the military, but ultimately Egypt's judges want revenge on the Brotherhood, and they're kind of acting out of turn.
For what, though? What's the revenge? I mean, what's the crime of the Muslim Brotherhood with respect to the judiciary that they would want to sort of eliminate and, you know, pass judgment over, you know, the assassination or the execution of thousands of Muslim Brotherhood members?
Well, they took it personally when Morsi started moving against the judges, and there was talk about a judicial purge. It didn't really happen, but that was very much a confrontation that we were seeing under Morsi. And also, let's not forget, Egypt's judiciary dissolved the first democratically elected parliament, which was a disaster, and I think one of the original sins of Egypt's transition in terms of undermining trust in society. So I just think that there's this illusion sometimes every couple decades where there's a belief that you can destroy the Brotherhood or like-minded groups. But it's an illusion. It's a fool's errand. It's not going to work, and we saw this time and time again. Nasser tried, didn't ultimately work. Assad, the father, tried in the 1980s, and the Brotherhood was eradicated from Syrian society. But then once you have a political opening, you see the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood re-emerging. The same thing in Tunisia. I think the lesson there is these movements are deeply entrenched in their societies. They're reflecting a widespread desire to have Islam or Islamic law playing a more prominent role. So you can try to kill an organization, but you can't kill an idea. So we have to go through this again, but we kind of know what the result is. It's not going to work. The Brotherhood has staying power. It's been around for more than 8 decades.
Yeah. Okay, a sort of a pointed question about the failure of Egypt's democratic transition. The dominant view that we read today about why things went wrong and why we are at the moment we are today is the following. There was a transition that was attempted. The Muslim Brotherhood, yes, they were democratically elected, but when they came to power, they confirmed the worst fears that many people had. They were undemocratic, so they are largely responsible for trying to ram down this constitution. And yes, the military is behaving like all militaries have, and so you have the Muslim Brotherhood who substantively contributed to the demise of the democratic transition. You also have the military who seized the opportunity, and you had these liberal groups, unfortunately, who are caught in the middle of these two anti-democratic forces. Broadly speaking, that's the narrative in the mainstream. How do you respond to that construction of events?
First of all, I don't think the characterization of Morsi as a dictator or a dictator in the making is accurate. And actually, recently, me and a co-author, Meredith Wheeler, we tried to quantitatively answer this question of just how undemocratic Morsi really was. And we scored Morsi's tenure according to the Polity 4 Index, and we compared that to other transitional situations. And what we found, depending on what set of cases you compare Morsi to, he was pretty much at the mean value, or sometimes even more democratic or less autocratic than certain sets of cases. And we went through this in a very systematic way. And I think that it's important to judge Morsi based on a benchmark and not based on the hopes and aspirations of revolutionaries. Obviously, he fell short of what many Egyptians were asking for. He was a bad leader. He didn't govern inclusively. He was incompetent. His style wasn't appropriate for a lot of Egyptians. That's all true. But transitions are difficult, messy, uneven, and sometimes bloody. So we have to kind of readjust expectations. And what we wanted to do in this article was, what is the baseline for transitions? And that's the right way to assess Morsi's tenure in power. I would also say, though, and this is one of the main themes in my book, Temptations of Power, this idea that there is a fundamental ideological divide in an Egyptian society, and we have to take ideas and ideology seriously. You have Islamists, and then you have secularists or non-Islamists or whatever you want to call them. They do actually have legitimately distinctive worldviews. And that's what contributes to this kind of raw existential politics, because so much is at stake. They're not disagreeing over policies or even economic issues, which are tangible and material. They're disagreeing over the foundations of the nation state, the meaning of the nation state, the identity of Egypt, the role of religion in public life. That's some pretty personal stuff, and it arouses passions which I think are disproportionate to reality. I mean, you look at Morsi and you wonder sometimes, yes, it's understandable that people dislike the Brotherhood, but what explains this bloodlust, this desire for brutal, brutal reactions, revenge, and really the killing of fellow Egyptians?
What's the answer to the question? Well, how do you explain the, in the aftermath of the coup, you saw these people claiming to be liberal, claiming to be moderates, sort of, lusting after the blood, or so at least supporting the crackdown. These people were basically violently demonstrating in downtown Cairo. And when the military goes in and kills, over 1,000 Egyptians in one day, the liberals are all cheering. So
this is one of the key questions.
That demands an explanation of some sort.
It's challenging. Yeah. And it's funny, sometimes, me and some friends, we play a game where we try to count how many prominent liberals opposed the military coup in Egypt. Yeah. And we get to maybe 2 or 3, literally.
Amr Hamzawi and who else?
Hassan Baghdad. There's maybe 1 or 2 more. You can get to 4 if you're lucky. So this says something, and I think this is illustrative of the unique nature of the Islamist secular divide. I think there is something distinctive here. And I would say that Islamism isn't quite like Christian democracy or socialism for a variety of reasons, and that's a whole different discussion. But so I think that's part of it. And so I've started a new project where I'm looking comparatively at post-coup situations. So looking at, for example, at Chile and Argentina in the 1970s, the coup that ousted Salvador Allende in 1973, liberals were split on that. Some liberals supported the coup, some opposed it. So far, we haven't been able to find any case where pretty much, liberal support of a military coup was unanimous. So we have to ask ourselves, is there something exceptional about Egyptian politics or even Arab politics more generally? I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with exceptionalism because that gets us into a debate about cultural or religious essence, but I think we really have to look a little bit deeper at the nature of these divides, and there is something more challenging about incorporating political Islam in the existing secular systems of the Middle East, and that's the real challenge. So I would actually say, yes, Morsi and the Brotherhood were failures simply because they weren't able to stay in power. They were ousted, so they didn't succeed, obviously. But I think the bigger, deeper failure of the Arab Spring is the inability of existing secular state systems to find a way to accommodate Islamist participation in the democratic process. Even if we look at one of the bright spots, Tunisia, even there's a real question of whether Islamists can fully be Islamist. So when Nahda has made, the main Islamist party in Tunisia has made compromise after compromise on really fundamental ideological issues, for example, Sharia and the Constitution, and that's so far, we give them credit for that. But what if Islamists want to fully express their Islamism? Shouldn't that be their right? I mean, if they're reflecting a popular sentiment, if they're reflecting the aspirations of their conservative base, at some point, if there's a demand for it, someone's got to supply it. So I think there's an open question of, first of all, will secular opposition groups accept Islamists being fully themselves? Can these existing state structures, whether it's militaries, security establishments, ministries of interior, will they be able to come to terms with the rise of Islamists? I think Tunisia is going to be the key test case. I don't think it's been resolved yet, even there. There's still a long way to go.
Well, I have a dozen more questions, but you have to lecture in a few minutes, so let me just thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.